Hello, and welcome to this week's Qredible Live broadcast. As always, I'm here with our CEO and chairman, Brian Fitzpatrick, and this week we are joined by Ian Peterman. Ian is the founder and CEO of Peterman Design Firm, where he brings over 15 years of professional design and management expertise to support clients in a wide range of industries. And he's here today to talk about research and development for the cannabis industry. Thank you for being on the show today, Ian. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit more about your background and the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's gonna be fun. I give you the brief backstory. I started design when I was 12, doing some work under my dad, and then 16, I got a real job doing design work. Still liked it, and then from there, I built a career working for HP and companies like that, developing products. And then about 10 years ago, I started. It was the first design firm. I was one of four partners, ran that for a few years. Nobody else wanted to keep going, so I branched off on my own because I still liked it. And so 2017, I launched this firm, Peterman Design Firm, and we focus a lot on the R&D design engineering of products, but we also have a really strong position in branding and packaging because we feel that those two should go together and not be these separate siloed pockets. And so we've done all kinds of products, many different industries, refueling trucks, we've done consumer electronics, industrial equipment, lasers, toys, did some lightsabers, um, really, really everything on the board. But we have, to what we're talking about today, we worked quite a bit in the CBD cannabis and even food space. We're pretty heavy regulated industries, right? And so there's a lot of intricacies that go into that. But yeah, that's the 30-second overview.
That's awesome. So you're serious about design when you start at 12 years old. So man after my own heart. I started my first business at 9. So it's awesome to see that you've been at this for a long time. And as I told you, as we chatted before, design and bringing products to life has got to be really, really exciting. And
I love it.
And you've worked on everything from cannabis to lightsabers. I mean, that's really cool, right? I love that, and everything sounds like everything in between as well. And so you've sort of made this pivot into cannabis and hemp, but I know you've been involved in the industry probably for 10 years or so. So you're no stranger to the industry. But to me, I think it's really important to talk about why people should care about this. About this design and getting this product, these products to market in sort of CBD and cannabis and getting it right. Because I think, we're in a very, very interesting time where the stigma's changing, the buyer's changing, and, it's got to be exciting to help figure all this stuff out. So talk a little bit about, what you do there and why, why should we care about this? Why should the industry really care about this design aspect and getting the product identity right?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey watching. It's a, I would say, once in a lifetime event to see a whole new industry appear and blossom and grow. And so, I wasn't there for coal or steel, but I was here for cannabis becoming a real market. And what I've seen, in the beginning, it was the person, the bud tender, the bud masters growing it. It was all centered around them because their demographics was you had to be really into it beforehand. You weren't the average person. This was kind of that nobody talked about, nobody nobody wanted to look at it kind of thing. And so marketing then was really focused on this is what it does. This is how it compares to everything that's been grown before because you had to have that frame of reference. And now we've really pivoted as it's becoming more accepted. The stigmas are going away. The market is here. In the US, states are making plenty of money off of the taxes. They want to keep it. It's not going to go away. Now the average consumer of it is not the person who smoked a bunch. It's people that have very corporate jobs. They're parents. They're people that you would never have seen them touch it 10, 15 years ago. they're now the average consumer. And when you have that kind of shift, what we've run into in working with these brands is you oftentimes they started back 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and so they build their brand around what the person who's really into it is like. Oh, I know how to grow the perfect strain, and that's not really your focus group. That's not who you should be aiming towards. And so that's where design comes into play. When you're not just, it's like selling computers to people that are really love the technical side of building their computers. That's a totally different thing than selling an Apple computer to someone who's like, I don't care how it works. I don't care what kind of soil you grew it in. I don't care any of that. What I want to know is, what does it do? What are the benefits? Where can I buy it? How much is it? Is it cost effective? What's the bang for my buck? Is it going to make me do weird things? Yes, no. Like that's what the average consumer, because we're still educating some, but we're having people where this is their first time still, right? And so when you have that, things like design become one of the most important things to use, because you're trying to communicate a lot of information. It's still, we think of it as it's been around for a decade, like but it's not a mature market, right? We have not reached the maturity level where everybody understands. It's not common knowledge quite
Well,
yet.
it's still evolving, right? It's
Yeah,
evolving
and
quickly.
there's so many new people keep up with new products. There's so many ways to consume it, right? And you have droppers, you have drinks, you have everything, edibles, smokable, like there's so much. And so if design is one of those tools where you can really bridge that gap between someone who knows nothing other than their friend is like, hey, this is cool, check it out, right? And how do you communicate with them? And what we've been doing is helping these brands that have been really focused on, oh, this is basically branded and packaged for somebody who knows it, loves it, super excited, wants to know all those details, and shifting them in. That's not maybe you have your line that's like that's for like the audio file of cannabis, but if you look at like the audio, I know you have a great speaker system in your in your space right now, right?
Yeah, he caught me blaring my music when he came into the green room.
It was perfect timing. Perfect timing. You got to figure out how to do that every time. But there's, if you look at other like that, using the audio market, because I worked in that space doing, I did recording engineering speakers, which there's that level of like, this is a audio engineer. They've spent 20 years in this space. They went to school for this. They did, right. They care about all the technical things. If you look at the audio market as a whole, that's like 2%. And so what we have is all of these cannabis and CBD brands that are still branded, because it used to be that 2% was the only people buying it. And so they're like, here's the market, we got to go after them. But now we have this 98% of the market that's they want, they want the Bose speaker. They just buy it and it connects to their phone and it works. Like that's all they care about. And they're price comparing and things like that.
And yeah, so and I think what you're really talking about is really understanding what that brand identity needs to be, wants to be, is trying to be. So it's taking sort of that linear, left brain sort of ideas of what the market fulfillment is, and adding to that right brain. And, if any of you caught my LinkedIn post recently, you heard about one of my favorite books, A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. And it really talks about the fact that we live in the age of abundance, right? So we have such an emphasis on design. And I always kid and say, you can't buy a toilet brush without it being the Martha Stewart collection, right? There's got to be some type of appeal in packaging and design. And I think one of the big challenges is in this industry is you don't really have free reign, because you got key compliance requirements as well. So you got to have child resistant and tamper evident packaging. You got to follow all the labeling standards of the ASTM THC labeling and net weight and batch numbers and health warnings. And and what the primary panel should display as far as the universal cannabis symbol, and then there's the prohibited elements that you got to put on there, and then there's state specific regulations. So, and then of course you get into all the design considerations, which we're going to talk a little bit later about the whole sustainability issue and then your brand identity on that. Because, I thought about this, like when I go into a dispensary to buy my sleep gummies, I really do look at the packaging. Like if it's too, like potheadish or, weedish, it's like, I'm not that guy, right? I'm using this to sleep. So I'm looking for more of a streamlined, sort of elegant
sleepy time would be more
like, like I don't want to see like this big giant marijuana leaf in there and like, having that up in my house. Right.
Right. So, well, that's where one of the things is, I think when you're in the industry and you're busy, like, oh, I have my company, I built my brand. We all like to think that brands are, oh, I just said it and forget it.
Yeah.
And it's not true, especially with this industry that I think people keep forgetting, is that it's still growing. This is still an infant market. We have no idea what it's going to be in 20 years. There's no way to predict it, other than I can tell you it will not be what it is now. It's going to change more, because all markets do that as they mature. And so to all your points, right, you got to think about these things. You're not the buyer from 10 years ago.
Yeah,
you happen to be walking in and buying stuff because you know that it works or you want it, and you're doing it in spite of design and in spite of packaging, rather than because of it. It's those, if you go to like a grocery store, you're looking at all those things. They're fighting for your attention. They're not there just selling because they're the only option. And I think that's the other thing, is that we get more and more brands out there. It used to be that, oh, well, there's only like 10 brands. So like, what are you going to, there's no really fighting. There's like 10 choices. That's it. Choose it, buy what you want, leave. That's it. And as you get more brands out there, design is the only way you can really differentiate yourself, because if you're in a dispensary, you're in a store, you got a couple seconds, right? And you're walking by, something's going to catch your eye. It's not studied, it's catching your eye, which means glancing. It's got to stand out to you, the person you want to sell it to. And that's something that, not everybody has been doing really well. And it's required.
You get so involved in the R&D effort of many, many different products, and because you're really helping the inventor, the manufacturer, sort of create the brand, show the brand in the packaging, bring it to market, and there's a lot of R&D effort into that. But it's very different bringing a lightsaber to market than it is bringing, a cannabis brand to market. So talk a little bit about those nuances that are involved in the R&D process for a cannabis or CBD brand or hemp brand or something of the sort.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Anytime you're working with something that you expect someone to eat or ingest in some way, there's a lot of work behind it. So we work with chemists, we work with growers. There's, it's a living plant, so there's a lot to it. It's farming, but you farm it, then you process it. So there's differences in soils and differences in, is it greenhouse or outside? There's differences in how do you extract? You're doing a specific extraction, right? You're not just doing the bud. How do you extract it? Multiple ways to do that. And so oftentimes what it comes down to when we're working on something like that, we start with, well, what's your actual end goal and who are you trying to sell to? And we really, if you don't answer those questions, it's going to bite you later. And that's what we're seeing brands. They're kind of getting bit by that, as they put all this time and effort into a product and they didn't brand it right, they didn't package it right, they're not explaining it. And there's still, right, if you're in it, you are like, oh, I know how this works. I know how to distill this and turn this, it's right. It's in your head and you just know. And it's getting that information out. Like, yeah, we can do this 1,000 different ways. Great. What about that is important? What makes an impact to your actual end user? And does it matter at all? And if at the end, because people will get really tight, it's actually a very similar industry is beer, brewing beer. When you talk to the brewmaster, you can figure like, oh, well, I soak my grain for 42 and a half hours. I could, right? They get into all those technical. I don't care. Does the beer taste good? Yes, no. Do I like it? But it matters to produce it, but it doesn't matter to the customer, and really extracting that and helping how when we do the product development is helping them understand. Yes, it does technically matter, but if at the end of the day the user can't taste the difference, can't experience the difference between method A, B, and C, you really need to pick which one's going to be most cost effective. Like
Yeah,
there's other
I'm
metrics.
I'm old enough to remember when you would go to the mall as like a young person, and you'd have these marketing people walking around with the little clipboards, and they take you into some back room and they'd let you try this new cereal that was coming out, and
Right.
they had all these people eating cereal. I guess you can't do that with cannabis. Snagging
Not
people at the
yet.
mall, taking them in a back room and feeding them gummies. Yeah, I guess that's not
I
going
don't
to
know.
work.
I mean, some people might be down for that. That you could try it, see if it works now.
Probably would
I
be,
get in
but
trouble.
I guess there's a lot of challenges though, because you got regulatory compliance, that you have
Yep.
to you have to be aware of. You've got marketing restrictions, as to all the traditional advertising channels are sort of off limits. The major platforms like Google, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, are prohibiting cannabis advertising.
Well,
And
actually, I work with a company that has worked with Facebook enough. We can get he can get ads to stick with Facebook.
awesome.
But
So
he's the only person I've met that can do it. I don't know what his deal is, how he navigated that, but he's gotten approved to do those with Facebook.
wow.
Google is still on the fence, but he's able to do that. So
Well, yeah,
those
and
out
then
there,
you
it's
just have to.
possible. You got to find
Then
the
you
right
just have
person.
to. It's possible. We got to find that guy. We got to get that guy on our podcast. Taylor, run that down. So
I'll make the intro. Yeah,
that'll be perfect
he's a
because
buddy of mine. We work together a ton, so
he's going to
it's
be
awesome.
very, very busy. And then you got the whole stigma and perception. So despite the fact that I think that it's being accepted right at more record rates, it still carries some negative stigma, which you have to be aware of. And then there's the differentiation. So that's one of the key things. Like I've noticed in some markets that it's very difficult to differentiate, in a very crowded space, these products. So you have to be thinking about, I would imagine, how we differentiate this, and then provide consistency across the product line, and by looking at who the target audience is and how we get that message out. So I think that it's probably fair to say that this is a lot more challenging than taking many other things you work on to market, I would imagine.
It has unique challenges, especially with all the regulatory side of it. And it's funny. It has a lot of challenges, but it's not drastically different than working with nutraceuticals or even food, because food, the FDA regulates all that. You have a labeling requirement, and there's only so many ways you can make a loaf of bread. Like
Right.
there's
Yeah.
there is a finite amount eventually, like unless you start throwing really weird random things into your bread, right? There's a range of acceptable bread that will actually sell, right? And so it's the same challenge. Where I think it's more challenging in the cannabis space is the companies, the founders are still thinking that, oh, this is new and there's like unlimited room to grow and unlimited ways to do this, and they haven't quite realized that the same thing that the companies that make bread, for example, have already realized for 50 years.
Well, right,
There's
because
only so many kinds. We got to figure out something. Design is going to be how it's a brand. How do
right,
you
because
get loyal customers?
bread's been around a long time. So
Yeah,
but
we've been eating it for 1,000 years.
right. So I think just because of the newness and of the product and the legal status, I would imagine that all the comprehensive market research we have about bread and other food products to inform about product launch and branding decisions and the do's and don'ts, the pitfalls that you've seen happen to avoid. It's like, it's pretty new. So, I mean, you're trudging new ground. So I think it talks about the importance of working with somebody like you and your firm who has done this before. You've got some brand experience behind you. You've been able to see what works, what doesn't work. You've been able to sort of, make some progress there. And what from your perspective, what solutions to these problems do you and these challenges? I mean, to me, every challenge or problem creates a business opportunity. It's just the way I've been raised to think.
I'm with you. These are all really good opportunities, especially for the brands that are willing to do it now, because it will kill your brand eventually if you don't change at this point. Like it's going to happen. The biggest thing is realizing that just like beer, as much as somebody's like, oh, I made the perfect brew, I made the perfect, but like that's great. That's great that you did that, but you need to look at what else is about your brand. Are you sustainable? Is your packaging unique? Is the user experience for consuming, like it's still the same plant. Like as much as they're like, oh, I have a special strain, like yes, but we also have like 20 different strains of different wheats that we can grow and turn into bread. We're leaving that space where people are really caring about that as much as what's the packaging experience. Is it easy for me to, as I get a thing of gummies, do they stay separate? Do they melt really easily? Is the packaging too hard to open repeatedly? Is it, those experience points? And from a brand perspective, when I buy this product, do I feel good about myself? Does this brand support something else that I care about? Do they donate to, I don't know, wildlife fund, regrowing trees? Is it sustainable? What else? And you got to start looking at those other factors. And that is how different companies in very crowded spaces start to really actually differentiate themselves, because their product is going to be so close. Like you can probably find a bunch of different CBD products that will get you to sleep really well. Okay, cool. They all do that, but what's the other part? Is it the packaging? Is it, well, this has the aesthetic appeal to me? Is it that they described it in a different way? They explained how to use. There's so many different things beyond just the product itself, and uh, founders do this all the time, especially inventor types. When you get really focused on like, well, the product it's so great, it's so great. Like, yeah, but there's also 20 people doing almost the same thing as you. Like, start to branch out and how you differentiate yourself from everyone else.
So that's a pitfall, right? So, one of the things I know as an entrepreneur, and always trying to invent new ways of doing things and new methods, is I always warn the team that we should not believe our own BS, right? We have to get validation.
Kool-Aid.
Right. Because if we're like all gung ho and we're all excited about it, but nobody cares, then we don't really.
Yeah, if the market doesn't care, it doesn't matter.
So you're talking about these things like, oh, we grow, we grow our product doing this method and it's really cool. But if the mainstream market's like, oh yeah, that's great, but what are those things? I think that's a main pitfall, I think, that we have to look out for in growing these brands. What are some of the other things some of the other pitfalls that our listeners may fall prey to that they got to be careful on, and the things that they should focus on?
I think one of the other important ones is looking at it from a brand and company perspective. Something that we really focus our clients on is, what is your legacy? What is your long term with this? And there's a lot of, especially in a new industry, it's really easy to be like, I'm just going to do this really quick, not worry about it. It's going to grow, and really spending time thinking about, okay, well, this market is going to keep growing. How do you build something now, knowing that the market is going to change drastically? Like we've seen how much it's changed in the last 10 years. It's going to change more in the next 10. Assuming you want to have a business in 10 years, how do you put things in place from a brand and a business standpoint to make sure that you are able to still make changes, right? Because one of the biggest pitfalls of any company is you start to scale, you grow really quickly, especially this kind of market. It's brand new, there's always new customers coming in. We don't even know what the customer cap is yet of this market. Like I can't even estimate that with research because it's growing at a exponential rate. How do you prepare yourself so that you don't scale and become too stiff in what you're doing and that you're unable to change? Because that change is happening. That's the only thing we can guarantee with this market at this point is it's gonna change. And if you're not constantly questioning what you're doing and going, yeah, this was great 2 years ago. Is the market the same? Are our customers the same? Because it's super easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, we did all the analytics for a year. This is who our buyer is. This is our customer. This is our right? Get all that demographic and kind of just sit there and go, okay, we know who we're selling to. But in this market, that we've seen, this has not actually served you very well if you've done that. And so constantly looking at that, and it's not a set and forget thing. This is a constant. Your brand is going to need to change as you go, and you more than any other industry, you have to look at that information and go, well, last year our average customer was a 23-year-old X, well, whatever else, and now it's 45-year-olds that need gummies to go to sleep. We're selling those. That's our market, and
or a little older.
Or older, yeah. But you know what I mean? Like everyone, if your customer is changing, you might go, okay, well, you have to understand why. Why are those people buying your brand? Is it they're buying the product in spite of your branding? Is it your branding is actually working? Do you need to change things? And really, really just getting comfortable with the fact that this isn't something like steel. Like
right.
We all
that makes sense. Just a couple minutes as we start to wrap up here. In 2020, when everybody was going through COVID, locked in their house and eating too much and drinking too much, you wrote a book, right? So you got bored and you wrote a book, as people weren't launching a lot of new brands during COVID. So you wrote a book. You wrote the book on conscious design. Talk to me a couple minutes about that.
Yeah, so conscious design was really the thought exercise of how do you go about designing products and brands and even companies in a way that you're able to differentiate, you're able to really understand the market for the designer. Because there's a lot of things. I went to design school. They don't teach you everything that you need to know to do it. There's only so much you can fit in 4 years. And so this was basically everything that I've learned and how to think through the design process, incorporating in branding and packaging and business design. Because when you launch a new product, it's super easy to just focus on, oh, here's the widget, it does X, and focus on that, and not really think about, well, how does the product design impact the brand? How does the product itself impact your business model? And so how do you think through all of those areas to make sure that you're not pigeonholing yourself into a spot where the business model is not going to last long enough and you're going to have to redesign the product? Or how do you look at all the impacts that your product and brand are going to have and choose what are they going to be? And one of the things I talk about in that book is legacy, and it's this concept that we all are creating our own legacy. Whether you thought about it, that's the question. We're all creating it as we live. You have kids, right? It's as you've lived your life, you're creating what they're going to remember you for, what they're going to understand, and the same for everybody around you. If you aren't thinking about that, and especially when you launch a new company, right, you're going to be impacting, hopefully, a lot more people than just your immediate family. That's a successful company should. So
That's
thinking about
oh,
what do you want that legacy to be from day one, instead of just letting it happen, because we get too focused on, oh, here's the product, and that, thinking not long term enough. And so how do you think through that and really make it so that you're consciously designing that legacy rather than waiting until you're 90 and going, oh, that's what I'm remembered for. Cool. It was the banana bread I made. I built this other stuff over here, but nobody remembers that. They just remember banana bread, or
well,
whatever it is, right?
that's a great way to think beyond the process. Think about the longer term implications of that legacy and that product development. Ian, talk to us about how people can get in touch with you and learn more and work with you, more importantly, to take a product from conception into design all the way out to market.
Yeah, so two best ways are our website, petermanfirm.com, and then I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn, very active there. Just Ian Peterman and design. You'll find me. I'm usually in the top. So yeah.
Make sure you reach out to Ian. He's got a great hold on a great concept on how to bring products to life, and particularly in this industry. Next week we'll be back, and next Friday with Ken Fickler we'll be talking about impairment testing, a very important aspect of our industry, and another way that this industry is continuing to evolve. So thanks for joining us on Qredible Live. We'll see you next Friday with Ken Fickler.
Thanks for having me.